Don't follow me. Elena whispered into the cold, her voice barely louder than the crackling fire, as if the night itself might be listening, because an hour ago she had been standing under blazing torches while her name was spoken like a mistake, rejected before her entire pack. Eyes turned away from her like she carried something contagious, and now the forest stretched for miles in every direction, dark and endless. The temperature dropping fast, somewhere in the low 30s, her thin dress doing nothing to stop the chill from seeping into her bones. But she didn't cry. Not anymore. Not after the silence that followed her rejection had been louder than any insult. Not after even the wind seemed to pass her by without noticing she was there. So she built a small fire with shaking hands, feeding it dry twigs and broken branches until it flickered just enough to keep her from freezing. Her fingers hovering close to the flames as she stared into them, watching the light dance like it belonged to another world, one where she might have mattered, where she wasn't the Omega no one chose, the one they whispered about, the one who couldn't shift properly, who didn't belong. And for a while there was nothing but the fire and the quiet, the kind of quiet that presses in on your chest and makes you aware of every breath, every heartbeat, every second stretching longer than it should, until a sound broke it, low and distant, a rustle of leaves, a soft crunch of frost under something, heavier than the wind, and Elena stilled, her breath catching as her eyes lifted slowly from the fire to the darkness beyond it, because she knew that sound. Every wolf knew that sound. But there was something different about it, something steady, something intentional, and then she saw it, just beyond the reach of the firelight, a shape emerging from the shadows, large, silent, watching her with eyes that reflected the flames like twin shards of gold. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't move. Didn't run, because there was nowhere to run, not really. And something deep inside her, something quiet and stubborn, refused to let her show fear. So she stayed where she was, her hands resting in her lap, her gaze steady as the wolf stepped closer, its massive form now fully visible, breath curling. In the cold air, muscles shifting under thick fur, powerful, undeniable, and yet it didn't lunge, didn't bare its teeth. It simply stopped a few feet away and lowered itself to the ground, as if the fire belonged to her, and it had no right to come closer. And Elena blinked, confusion flickering through her exhaustion, because that wasn't how wolves behaved, not wild ones, not alone. And then another sound came from the trees, and another shape appeared, and then another, until the darkness itself seemed to breathe and move, and one by one they stepped into the faint glow of her fire. Wolves of different sizes, different markings, circling slowly, not closing in, not attacking, just arriving. And Elena's heart pounded now, not with fear, but with something she couldn't name, something that felt almost like recognition, as the first wolf remained still, its head slightly lowered, and then, without a sound, it shifted its weight and settled more comfortably against the frozen ground, as if it had decided to stay. And then the second wolf did the same, and the third, until the clearing filled with quiet, powerful forms lying in a loose circle around her, their bodies forming a barrier between her and the endless dark, their presence heavy but calm. And Elena sat in the center of it all, the firelight flickering across their fur, her breath slow and unsteady, her mind struggling to understand what she was seeing, because just hours ago she had been told she was unwanted, unchosen, alone, and yet here, in the middle of nowhere, with the temperature dropping and the night stretching long, a pack of wolves had come out of the darkness and chosen to stay. Elena did not realize she had stopped breathing until the cold burned her lungs and forced a quiet inhale, her gaze moving slowly from one wolf to another, counting without meaning 2, 3, 6, 10, more than she had ever seen gathered this close without tension or challenge. Yet there was none of that here. No raised hackles, no low growls, only a strange, steady calm that settled over the clearing like a second layer of warmth beyond the fire. And still she did not move, afraid that even the smallest shift might break whatever fragile understanding had formed between her and them. Because this did not make sense, not in any world she had known. Wolves did not gather like this around an Omega. They did not lower themselves. They did not choose stillness over instinct. And yet every single one of them remained exactly where they were, their eyes half-lidded but aware, their ears flicking occasionally at the distant sounds of the forest, always listening, always alert, but never for her, never against her, and slowly, carefully, Elena let her hands relax in her lap, the tension easing from her shoulders as the heat from the fire reached her skin again, mingling with something deeper, something that felt almost like being seen, a sensation so unfamiliar it made her chest tighten in a different way, because for so long she had learned how to disappear, how to make herself smaller, quieter, less noticeable. But here, surrounded by silent guardians, there was no place to disappear to, and strangely, she did not feel the need to. Her eyes drifted back to the first wolf, the one that had approached her before. The others, its presence still the most grounding, the most certain, and as if sensing her attention, it lifted its head slightly, meeting her gaze directly, not with dominance, not with curiosity, but with something steady and unwavering. And Elena swallowed, her voice barely more than a breath as she spoke into the cold air, asking a question she did not expect an answer to. "Why are you here?" The words faded quickly, carried away by the wind, and for a moment nothing changed. The wolves remained still, the fire crackled softly, and the night stretched on. But then the first wolf shifted again, not moving closer, not retreating, simply adjusting its position so that its body angled more fully toward her, as if acknowledging her presence in a way she had never experienced before. And something in her chest responded to that, a faint warmth spreading outward, subtle at first, like the beginning of sunlight before dawn. And she pressed her hand lightly against her sternum, startled by the sensation, because this was not just the fire. This was something else, something alive, something that seemed to echo outward in a way she could not see, but somehow felt reflected in the quiet attention of the wolves around her. And one by one, almost imperceptibly, their breathing seemed to fall into the same rhythm as hers, slow, steady, connected. The clearing no longer felt empty or cold. It felt held, and Elena's eyes softened as she looked around again, no longer counting, no longer questioning every detail, just taking in the quiet presence of the pack that had chosen to remain. And for the first time since the torches had gone out and her name had been cast aside like it meant nothing, she allowed herself to lean back slightly, her shoulders lowering, her body no longer braced for rejection or dismissal, because nothing here was asking her to prove anything. Nothing here was waiting for her to fail, and the realization settled over her slowly, gently, like the warmth spreading from her chest, that whatever this was, whatever force had drawn these wolves to her in the middle of a freezing night in a forest far from anything familiar, it had nothing to do with the way her pack had seen her, nothing to do with what she had been told she lacked, and everything to do with something she had never been allowed to understand. And as that thought took shape, faint but undeniable, a new sound rolled through the trees, deeper than the others, heavier, not rushed, not uncertain, but deliberate, each step measured, each movement carrying a weight that seemed to press against the very air itself. And every wolf in the clearing responded at once, not with fear, not with alarm, but with recognition, their bodies shifting just enough to create space, their heads lowering slightly. And Elena felt it before she saw it, that same warmth in her chest flaring brighter, stronger, as her gaze lifted toward the darkness beyond the firelight, where something larger than the rest was approaching, something that made the night itself feel as though it was holding its breath. The moment it stepped into the edge of the firelight, the entire clearing seemed to shift, not with movement, but with presence, as if the air itself had grown heavier, quieter, aware, and Elena felt her breath catch again, not from fear, but from something deeper, something that pressed gently against her chest and spread outward in slow, steady waves, because this wolf was different, larger than the rest by at least a foot at the shoulder, its frame powerful in a way that did not need to be proven, its fur darker, touched with faint streaks of silver that caught the firelight like threads of moonlight woven into shadow, and its eyes, when they found her, were not gold like the others but a clear, striking silver that seemed almost reflective, as if they held more than just the present moment. And Elena could not look away, even as every instinct she had ever been taught told her she should lower her gaze, make herself small, invisible, but she did not, because something in those eyes did not demand submission, it invited recognition, and The wolf did not rush toward her, did not circle, did not test her in any way. It simply walked forward with measured steps, each one deliberate, until it reached the outer edge of the circle formed by the others, and then it stopped, its head tilting slightly as it studied her, the silence stretching between them, thick but not uncomfortable, like a held breath waiting for something unspoken to settle into place. And Elena felt that warmth in her chest respond again, stronger now, pulsing in time with her heartbeat, and without thinking, without planning, she shifted slightly closer to the fire, the light brushing across her face, revealing her fully to him, no shadows left to hide in. And for a second, she wondered if this was the moment everything would change, if the illusion of safety would break and reality would return, but it did not. Instead, the wolf lowered its head, not fully, not in submission, but in acknowledgement, a quiet, undeniable gesture that sent a ripple through the rest of the pack, their bodies responding instantly, each one lowering just a fraction more, as if following a silent command that had nothing to do with dominance and everything to do with respect. And Elena's heart pounded now, her fingers curling slightly against her palms as she tried to understand what she was witnessing, because this was not how the world worked, not the one she had been forced to live in, where rank decided everything, where omegas like her were expected to bow, to accept, to endure. And yet here, in the middle of the forest, surrounded by wolves who owed her nothing, the rules had shifted without explanation, and she felt it, deep in her bones, that whatever stood before her was not just another wolf, not just another presence drawn by the night, but something central, something that all the others aligned themselves around without question. And as if confirming that thought, the great wolf took one final step forward, closing the distance between them until only a few feet remained, close enough that Elena could see the slow rise and fall of its breath, could feel the faint warmth radiating from its body despite the cold air, and she did not pull back, did not retreat, even as her pulse echoed loudly in her ears, because that same quiet certainty held her in place, the same unexplainable calm that had kept her from running earlier. And then, in a movement so smooth it almost felt like it had always been meant to happen, the wolf lowered itself to the ground directly in front of her, its massive form settling with quiet strength, its head dipping just enough that its gaze remained level with hers. And the moment it did, something inside Elena shifted, not painfully, not violently, but unmistakably, like a door opening somewhere deep within her that she had not known existed. A rush of warmth spreading from her chest down her arms, into her fingertips, and she inhaled sharply, her hand lifting instinctively as if drawn forward by that sensation, hovering in the space between them. And for a second, the world narrowed to just that distance, the fire crackling behind her, the cold air brushing against her skin, the quiet presence of the pack surrounding them, all of it fading into the background as her fingers moved closer, until finally, gently, she let them rest against the thick fur at the edge of his shoulder, and the instant her skin made contact, the warmth surged brighter, stronger, not overwhelming but undeniable, and the wolf did not pull away, did not react with surprise or resistance. It simply remained still, its silver eyes fixed on her, steady and certain, as if it had been waiting for that exact moment, as if everything that had led her here, every step, every rejection, every silent endurance, had been guiding her toward this single point in time, where nothing needed to be said for the truth to begin unfolding. The warmth did not fade when Elena touched him. It deepened, spreading through her like a quiet current that carried something she could not name, something older than the fear she had learned to live with, and she felt her breath steady as if her body had found a rhythm it had been missing all along, her fingers resting lightly against the thick fur as the wolf remained still beneath her touch, not tense, not uncertain, simply present, and for the first time she noticed how calm he was, how grounded, as if the entire forest moved around him instead of the other way around. And slowly, almost without thinking, her hand shifted slightly, brushing along his shoulder in a small, careful motion, testing, and still he did not move away, his silver eyes never leaving hers. And there was something in that gaze that made her chest tighten again, not painfully, but with a quiet intensity that felt almost like recognition. And Elena swallowed, her voice soft, barely more than a whisper as she spoke again. not expecting words in return, not needing them. "What are you?" The question lingered in the air, fragile but honest. And though the wolf did not answer in any way she could hear, something changed. Something subtle but undeniable. The warmth inside her flaring brighter for just a moment, enough to make her inhale sharply, her fingers pressing slightly more firmly into his fur as if grounding herself. And around them, the rest of the pack remained still, but their attention had shifted, no longer simply watching but acknowledging, as if what was happening between her and the great wolf carried meaning beyond what she could understand, and Elena became aware of the space around her again. The circle of bodies forming a quiet barrier, the fire casting long shadows that moved across their forms, the cold air brushing against her skin but no longer biting the way it had before, and she realized then that she was no longer shivering, that the chill that had settled deep in her bones after her rejection had eased, replaced by something steadier, something that felt almost like belonging, and the thought startled her, because she had never allowed herself to think that word, not truly, not in a way that felt real. And yet here, surrounded by wolves who had chosen to stay, with this powerful presence before her that had lowered itself without hesitation, the idea no longer felt impossible. It felt inevitable, and her gaze softened as she looked at him, really looked this time, noticing the details she had missed. Before, the faint scars hidden beneath his fur, the way the silver in his coat caught the light differently with each small movement, the quiet strength in the way he held himself even at rest, and something in her mind began to piece together what her instincts had already understood, that this was not just a wolf, not just a leader among them, but something more, something that carried authority without needing to display it, something that the others followed without question. And as that realization settled, the wolf shifted slightly, not away from her, but closer, just enough that the space between them disappeared entirely, his presence now fully surrounding her, not overwhelming, but encompassing. And Elena felt that same pull again, stronger now, guiding her hand as it moved from his shoulder to the side of his neck, her fingers threading gently through the thick fur as if she had done it before, as if her body recognized him even when her mind could not explain it. And the moment her touch reached that point, the warmth surged once more, brighter, clearer, and for a heartbeat the world seemed to pause, the fire crackling softer, the wind stilling, the entire clearing holding its breath, and Elena's eyes widened slightly as something flickered at the edge of her awareness, a sensation like a memory that was not hers, like a voice without words brushing against her thoughts, not intrusive, not forceful, but present. And she did not pull away, did not resist, because there was no fear in it, only a quiet certainty that whatever this was, it had been waiting, just as he had. And her lips parted slightly as she exhaled, her voice softer than before, almost reverent without meaning to be. "I do not understand." And the wolf's gaze did not change, did not waver, but there was something in it now that felt closer, more focused, as if he heard her even without words, as if the distance between what she felt and what he knew was narrowing with every passing second. And deep inside her, that hidden place that had opened at his touch continued to unfold, slowly, steadily, like the first light of dawn reaching a horizon that had been dark for far too long. The moment she said it, the air seemed to listen, as if the forest itself leaned closer to hear the truth in her voice. And Elena felt something shift again, deeper this time, not just warmth but awareness, like a quiet thread connecting her to the presence before her, and her fingers stilled against his neck as that sensation grew clearer, not overwhelming, not forcing its way in, but unfolding slowly, patiently, as if it had all the time in the world to be understood. And she realized with a quiet start that she could feel him, not in a way that made sense, not through words or thoughts she could translate, but through impressions, steady and grounded, like standing beside something ancient and unshaken. And it did not press against her or demand her attention. It simply existed alongside her, waiting, and Elena's breath softened as she leaned slightly closer without meaning to, drawn by that same quiet pull that had kept her from running earlier. And her hand moved gently through his fur again, more certain now, less hesitant, as if her body was beginning to trust what her mind still questioned. And around them, the pack remained as they were, but their stillness had taken on a new quality, not just watchful but settled, like something had been completed simply by her touch, and she noticed then that a few of them had shifted even closer to the fire, not crowding her, but reinforcing the circle, tightening it just enough that the cold air no longer slipped through as easily. And the warmth grew stronger, wrapping around her in layers that had nothing to do with the flames alone. And Elena exhaled slowly, her shoulders lowering further as the tension she had carried for years began to loosen in ways she had never thought possible. Because no one was watching her with expectation, no one was waiting for her to fail, or correct her, or remind her of her place. And the absence of that weight was so unfamiliar it almost felt unreal. And her eyes drifted back to the wolf in front of her, studying him more closely now, noticing how the others seemed to orient themselves around him without looking directly, how their positions subtly aligned with his presence, how the space he occupied felt central even without movement. And something in her mind finally aligned with what her instincts had been whispering from the moment he arrived, that he was not simply part of the pack, he was the one they followed, the one they trusted without question, and yet he had chosen to lower himself before her, to meet her at her level instead of towering over her. And the realization sent another quiet wave through her chest, one that carried something close to disbelief, because she had spent so long believing she had nothing to offer, nothing that could draw attention except for what she lacked. And yet here she was, at the center of something she could not explain, with a presence before her that acknowledged her without hesitation, and her lips parted slightly as another thought surfaced, fragile but persistent. What if they were not here by accident? The idea lingered, taking shape slowly, and the more she considered it, the more the connection she felt seemed to respond, the warmth pulsing faintly as if in agreement, and her hand stilled again as she focused on that sensation, trying to understand it, trying to follow it. And for a brief moment, the world around her seemed to soften, the firelight dimming at the edges, the sounds of the forest fading, until there was only the quiet rhythm of her breath and the steady presence before her. And within that stillness, she felt it more clearly than before, a sense of recognition that did not come from memory, but from something deeper, something that did not need explanation to be real. And her voice, when she spoke again, was softer than ever, almost lost to the night, like "You know me." And though the wolf did not respond in any way she could hear, his gaze held hers with unwavering certainty. And in that silence, she understood something that words could not fully capture, that whatever had brought him here, whatever had drawn the entire pack to her fire in the middle of a freezing night, it was not chance, it was not curiosity, and it was not pity, it was something deliberate, something that had been set in motion long before she had ever stepped beyond the edge of her pack's territory. And for the first time since she had been cast aside, Elena felt the fragile beginning of a new truth forming within her, that being rejected might not have been the end of her story, but the moment it had truly begun. The realization did not come all at once. It settled into Elena slowly, like the warmth that had been building in her chest, steady and undeniable. And as she sat there with her hand resting against him, she began to notice something she had missed before, not just in him, but in herself, because the fear that had followed her into the forest, the sharp, familiar edge of rejection that had clung to her like a second skin, was no longer there in the same way. It had not vanished completely, but it had softened, like a distant echo instead of a constant presence. And in its place there was something new, something quieter but stronger, a sense of grounding that made her spine straighten just slightly, her breath deepened just enough that she could feel the cold air fill her lungs without it hurting. And she blinked, her gaze dropping briefly to her own hands as if she expected to see something different about them. But nothing had changed on the surface. No visible mark, no obvious sign, and yet everything felt different, as if something inside her had finally been allowed to exist without being pushed down or ignored. And when she looked back up at him, her expression had shifted in a way she did not fully understand. Less uncertainty, less hesitation, and more awareness. And the wolf seemed to recognize it instantly, his silver eyes holding hers with a steadiness that felt almost like approval, not spoken, not forced, but present. And around them, the pack adjusted again, not dramatically, just enough that Elena could feel the difference, a subtle tightening of their formation, a quiet reinforcement of the space she occupied. And she realized then that they were not just resting, they were watching, Not her in the way she was used to being watched, not with judgment or expectation, but with attention, as if her presence mattered, as if what she did next held weight, and the thought sent a faint ripple through her chest, that same warmth responding as if it understood something she did not, and she hesitated for a moment, her fingers still resting in his fur, before slowly, carefully, she let her hand move again, this time not testing, not uncertain, but intentional, her palm flattening slightly as she traced the line of his neck with a quiet confidence she had never felt before. And the response was immediate, not in movement, but in presence, the connection between them deepening, becoming clearer, like a signal strengthening after static fades, and Elena inhaled softly, her eyes widening just a fraction as that awareness expanded, because now she could feel more than just him, faint impressions extending outward, the presence of the others at the edge of her perception, distant but connected, like points of light she could not see but somehow knew were there, and it did not overwhelm her, it did not confuse her, it simply existed, waiting for her to understand it in her own time, and her voice, when she spoke again, carried a different tone now, still soft, still quiet, but steadier. I can feel you. The words were simple, but they held something more than before, and though the wolf did not answer with sound, the connection responded, a subtle shift, a quiet affirmation that resonated through her chest, and Elena let out a slow breath, her shoulders easing further as that realization settled into place, because this was not something being given to her, not something she had earned in this moment. It was something that had always been there, something she had been unable to access until now, and the thought lingered, reshaping the way she saw everything that had come before, the rejection, the silence, the isolation, all of it no longer felt like proof of her lack, but like something that had been hiding her, protecting her in a way she had never considered, and her gaze lifted again, meeting his with a quiet intensity that matched his own, and for the first time, she did not feel small under that gaze. She did not feel like she needed to look away. She simply met it, steady and present, and the world around them seemed to settle into that moment. The fire crackling softly, the cold night held at bay by the circle of bodies, the forest quiet but alive beyond them. And Elena felt it then, not just the connection, not just the warmth, but the beginning of something larger, something that stretched beyond this clearing, beyond this night, something that felt like a path opening where there had only been walls before, and she did not know where it would lead, did not know what it would ask of her, but for the first time, she did not feel afraid of that unknown. She felt ready to step into it, even if she did not yet understand why. The moment she said she could feel them, the connection sharpened, not suddenly, but with a clarity that made everything else fall quieter around it. Like the world had shifted just enough for her to notice what had always been there. And Elena felt her breath slow even further as that awareness spread, no longer just centered in her chest, but reaching outward, brushing lightly against each presence around her. And she realized she could distinguish them now, not as separate thoughts or voices, but as steady impressions, each one calm, grounded, loyal, all of them anchored to the same central force in front of her. And her gaze lifted again to the great wolf, understanding settling into her bones with a weight that felt both new and familiar, because he was not just part of this, he was the center of it, the one they followed without hesitation, the one they trusted without question, and yet he had chosen to meet her here, in the cold, in the dark, at her lowest point, not above her, but beside her, and that truth echoed through the connection like a quiet certainty. And Elena felt something inside her respond, not with doubt this time, but with recognition, as if a part of her had been waiting for this moment even when she had not known it existed, and her fingers moved slightly against his fur again, no longer tentative, no longer questioning, just present, and in return the connection deepened once more, the warmth steady and strong, not overwhelming but expansive, and she felt it then, something beyond the immediate circle, faint but unmistakable, like a horizon she could not yet see but somehow knew was there, a sense of distance and scale that stretched far beyond the clearing, and her breath caught softly as that awareness flickered at the edge of her understanding. Because whatever this was, it was not small, it was not limited to this moment, and she did not need words to know that it reached further than she could yet grasp, and the realization did not frighten her the way it might have before. Instead, it grounded her more deeply, as if the unknown itself had become something she could stand on, instead of something she needed to avoid. And the wolf in front of her seemed to sense that shift immediately, his posture changing just slightly, not rising, not breaking the stillness, but adjusting in a way that carried quiet acknowledgement. And around them, the pack responded again, their bodies shifting in near unison, not moving closer but aligning more precisely, as if responding to a signal Elena had not consciously sent. And she blinked, her attention flickering outward as she noticed the pattern forming, the subtle way they positioned themselves, the quiet coordination that had nothing to do with commands and everything to do with instinct and connection. And for a brief moment, a thought surfaced, fragile but undeniable, that she was somehow part of that pattern, not separate from it, not outside it, but within it. And her heart pounded once, hard and clear, as that idea took hold, because it changed everything. It reframed every moment that had led her here, every time she had been overlooked, every time she had been dismissed as less. And instead of those memories weighing her down, they now felt distant, like pieces of a story that no longer defined her. And she lifted her chin just slightly, her gaze steady as it met his again, no longer searching for answers in his expression, but recognizing the quiet certainty reflected there. And her voice, when she spoke, carried that same steadiness, still soft, still gentle, but no longer uncertain. I am not alone. The words settled into the space between them, simple but profound, and the connection responded immediately, a subtle expansion, a quiet affirmation that wrapped around her like the circle of wolves themselves. And Elena exhaled slowly, the truth of it sinking in deeper with each passing second, because for the first time, the absence she had carried for so long had been replaced with something real, something undeniable. And as the fire flickered beside her and the cold night stretched beyond the protective ring that surrounded her, she understood, not fully, not completely, but enough to change the way she saw herself, that whatever she had been told she lacked, whatever she had been made to believe she was not, had never been the truth. And the path opening before her now was not one of proving her worth, but of discovering it. The words lingered in the air, between them, quiet but unshakable, and Elena felt the truth of them settle deeper with every breath she took, not as a fleeting comfort, but as something solid, something that would not disappear when the night ended. And as that realization anchored itself inside her, the connection responded again, not with a surge this time, but with a steady expansion, like a horizon slowly coming into view. And she became aware of more than just the wolves closest to her, more than just the presence before her. She felt distance now, layers of it, as if the world beyond the forest was beginning to open in ways she had never experienced before, faint impressions stretching outward like threads she could not yet follow, but knew were there, waiting. And her breath caught softly as she focused on that sensation, her hand still resting against him, grounding her in the present even as her awareness reached beyond it. And the great wolf remained exactly where he was, unmoving, steady, his silver gaze fixed on her with a certainty that did not waver, as if he had known this moment would come, as if he had been waiting for her to understand what she was only just beginning to see. And Elena's fingers tightened slightly in his fur, not out of fear but out of instinct, as if holding on to something that felt both new and deeply familiar at the same time. And around them, the pack shifted once more, their movement subtle but purposeful, the circle adjusting not to close in, but to strengthen, to reinforce the boundary between her and everything beyond it. And she realized then that they were not just present, they were guarding, not because she was weak, but because she mattered, because whatever she was beginning to awaken was something worth protecting. And the thought sent a quiet ripple through her chest, the warmth responding like an echo, steady and strong. And her gaze lifted again to meet his, searching this time not for answers, but for confirmation, and she found it there in the unwavering calm of his expression, in the quiet power that surrounded him without needing to be shown. And something inside her settled fully for the first time, the last remnants of doubt loosening their hold as a new understanding took its place, not complete, not fully formed, but undeniable. And she exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing as that truth anchored itself within her, because she was not here by accident, She had not been cast out into nothingness. She had been led, even if she had not known it at the time, every step bringing her closer to this moment, to this place, to him. And the realization did not overwhelm her. It steadied her, like finding solid ground after walking too long on uncertain terrain. And as she sat there, surrounded by the quiet strength of the pack, with the fire casting soft light across the clearing and the cold night held just beyond their reach, she felt something else begin to take shape within her. Not just awareness, not just connection, but purpose, faint and distant, like the first outline of something that had yet to fully reveal itself. And she did not try to grasp it, did not rush to understand it. She simply allowed it to exist, trusting that it would unfold in time, just as everything else had. And the wolf in front of her seemed to recognize that choice, his presence shifting almost imperceptibly, not moving, not changing position, but deepening in a way that felt like acknowledgement, as if he understood that she had reached a point where she no longer needed to be guided step by step, where she could begin to stand within this new reality on her own. And Elena felt that recognition settle into her just as clearly as everything else, her gaze steady, her breath even, her hand still resting against him, no longer searching, no longer questioning, simply present. And in that quiet stillness, with the night stretching on around them and the fire burning steadily at her side, she understood something that changed everything that came before it, that she had never truly been alone. She had only been waiting for the moment she could finally see it. The fire had burned lower, its flames now softer, steadier, casting a warm glow that no longer fought against the cold but coexisted with it. And Elena sat within that quiet balance, her hand still resting against him, her breathing calm, her thoughts no longer racing to catch up with what she did not understand, because something inside her had shifted beyond the need for answers, beyond the constant question of why. And as that stillness settled deeper, the connection expanded once more, not outward this time, but inward, drawing her awareness closer to herself, to the place that had opened when she first touched him, and she felt it clearly now, a steady pulse beneath her ribs, not her heartbeat, but something aligned with it, something that carried a rhythm of its own, ancient and quiet. And as she focused on it, the sensation grew clearer, like a hidden current finally revealed, and her fingers tightened slightly in his fur as she followed that feeling, not forcing it, just allowing it to rise. And the moment she did, the world around her seemed to respond, the firelight flickering brighter for a second, the air shifting subtly, the entire clearing holding a stillness that felt almost expectant. And Elena's breath caught softly as she realized that whatever this was, it was not just something she could feel, it was something that could be seen, something that existed beyond her. And she lifted her gaze slowly, meeting his again, and this time there was no uncertainty left in her expression, only quiet clarity, because she understood now, not every detail, not every reason, but the truth at the center of it all. And she spoke it without hesitation, her voice soft but steady. I was never broken. The words settled into the space between them like a final piece falling into place, and the connection answered instantly, not with a surge, not with force, but with certainty, a deep, resonant stillness that wrapped around her and held firm. And the great wolf before her did not move away, did not rise above her. He remained exactly where he was, his silver eyes steady, his presence unwavering, as if acknowledging what she had just claimed. And around them, the pack responded in a way that made her breath catch again, not with sound, not with motion, but with alignment, each wolf lowering fully now, their bodies relaxed but their posture unmistakable, a unified gesture that carried no hesitation, no doubt. And Elena felt it, not as something external, but as something connected to her, as if their acknowledgement flowed through the same quiet thread that bound them together. And for a moment, everything seemed to hold in perfect balance. The fire, the cold, the forest, the pack, all of it centered around the space she occupied, not because she had demanded it, not because she had earned it in the way she had once believed she needed to, but because it had always been there, waiting for her to step into it. And her shoulders lowered as that truth settled fully into her, the last trace of the girl who had been cast aside fading into something distant and unimportant, replaced by a presence that felt steady, grounded, undeniable. and she did not need to prove it, did not need to question it. She simply was, and the wolf in front of her shifted. Slightly then, not rising fully, not breaking the connection, but lifting his head just enough that their eyes aligned perfectly, his gaze holding hers with a quiet intensity that carried something more now, not just recognition, not just acknowledgement, but promise. And though no words were spoken, Elena understood it, felt it as clearly as everything else that had unfolded that night, that this was only the beginning, that whatever path had opened before her would not lead her back to what she had left behind, but forward into something she had never been allowed to imagine. And as the fire crackled softly beside her, and the first faint hint of dawn began to touch the horizon beyond the trees, Elena Whitmore sat at the center of the clearing, no longer hidden, no longer unseen, and for the first time in her life, she did not feel like she needed to become something else to be worthy, because she finally understood that she already was.